I'm Mary Claire, for a start. I was told like, maybe about a week ago by someone who was asked what I do by someone else, and she described me as just a creative, which I found quite cool. Because I do a bunch of different things. So I draw and I paint, I do clowning, I write poetry, I've written a poetry play, and all of that I do just because I love creating stuff, and I like the kind of interconnectedness of different art forms, and I'm always intrigued by the fact that there is such, creativity is creativity, and then there are different ways of expressing that, and depending on what I'm trying to express, there could be a different way of doing that. So I want to develop different avenues, so that I can choose the right ones for the right situation.
Yeah, my name's Ed, and I'm primarily like a singer-songwriter, but I've always been interested in the intersection between music and poetry, so hence why Hame-ish is been good and something that we started. So yeah.
So Hamish started out as mainly focusing on putting on poetry and music events, but a little bit different format than other shows. And we're not saying that our format is completely unique, but it's not the normal format,
Yeah.
because rather than having acts perform sets, we base our format on traditional Ceilidh gatherings, where people would perform they would take turns to perform whatever, and they would be inspired by whatever someone previously had performed. So you might hear a song or a poem, and there would be some kind of connection between them. So we took that inspiration and created our Hamish format, where just in the same way, one performer will maybe be a musician, so you hear a song from them, and then the next person will perform a song or a poem, whatever their outlet is, which is in some way inspired by what they've just heard. And that creates a bit of a flow across the show. So that was our sort of original sort of like inspiration for creating Hamish, and that has then inspired a number of different offshoots of activities, and a couple of different flavours of the kind of Hamish show and format.
Yeah, I mean that flow is kind of really at the heart of Hamish. The whatever events that we do, so we started with the Hamish original format, as Mary Claire said, and then we've sort of moved on to a Hamish cabaret, which is acts that do sets, but the heart of the show is always a Hamish live section, which is very similar to what the Hamish original idea is, except it's on the spot. So just people sign up and we put them on stage together. That's another part of the format actually, is that the acts, when there's a Hamish sharing happening, all the acts are on stage, and then whoever's is taking their turn is at the front, and then they sit back down. But that sort of collective gathering on the stage is quite important, I think. And yeah, people, the Hamish Live people come up with something on the spot, and then the next person. So it's to me, it's kind of like a parlor game. It's like you get somebody to start it off, and they do their piece, and then the next person, it's like, which card am I going to play? Am I going to do this one? I'm going to do this one. And there's no, that's something we'll also stress to the acts as well. Like, there's no wrong answer. There's no, oh, that was a wrong choice. And like, stop them. That's part of the keep the whole part is to keep the flow going, and and you find all sorts of connections and all sorts of things that happen within that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as Ed mentioned, we therefore for our shows have the Hamish original and the cabaret, and the difference, Ed has mentioned the Hamish live, our originals, where we kind of got people together in advance of a show, where they would do that devising, and then we would capture that kind of like running order of pieces, and then tweak it a little bit, and then put that on. So the people that take part in our Hamish live are very brave indeed, because they don't get that opportunity to come together and kind of figure it out in advance. They are just like on the spot. And I think what we've kind of like found about the format generally, whether it's in a cabaret or a Hamish original, is that once people, you explaining it to people is one thing, but when they come along and actually take part as part of the show or are part of the audience, then that's when they really get the kind of vibe that we're trying to create. So that the tagline of our shows, all of them, is a night out that feels like a night in. So that's the kind of like cosy, kind of like parlour type of setup that we're trying to create. And yeah, you said they choose the make-up on the spot. We're not asking them to like write a poem off the top of their head or anything like that. Just to
select something.
they select something from their kind of like back catalogue.
Yeah.
And I think that's been really inspiring for performers as well, because very often they come to us afterwards and say, if I was doing a normal set, I would never have done that poem or that song or that sequence of. So it gives them the opportunity to share work that maybe they wouldn't be top of their mind to put in a normal set, but when it comes up, when a theme comes up or someone does something that makes them think, oh, absolutely, this is the one that and they might not have performed it for years. So that adds a little bit of kind of jeopardy as well, which is quite cool. And the other things that we do in Hame-ish Arts is that we incorporated as Hame-ish Arts about a year ago, but we were doing shows before then. And since we've become a social enterprise, we started doing more collaborations. So in January this year, we collaborated with an artist, Wendy Sarah. She had an exhibition and she wanted some poetry to go along with that. So we ran a competition and invited people from our orbit to respond to her paintings with poems, and then the poems that were selected were displayed at the exhibition alongside her paintings, which was just lovely and exciting for the poets, because I think one of the things that I'm certainly quite passionate about is that paintings and some other art forms, one painting is celebrated as something which is special, whereas you need to create a whole book or pamphlet of poems, and I think this was an opportunity for a poem to be framed and sitting out there proud, which was really lovely for people who might not. Some people had like collections of poetry, others might have just written a few poems, and this was so it was very kind of like levelling, which was really exciting. And the other thing we do in Hame-ish Arts is we also run clowning workshops. So I am in the midway training as a clown facilitator. I've been doing clowning myself for a few years, and that is also an art form which I guess in some ways connected to the spirit of Hamish, and that there's that kind of like spontaneity, but also it's a wonderful way to access that part of you that is creative, because it takes away the kind of like overthinking about stuff, and you just do, and you get into that space of flow, which is where I think is what adds the magic to our Hamish shows. So yeah, all about the interconnectedness.
Yeah, just actually circling back to the Wendy Sarah show, that was one of the big things with that is the combination of the painting and the poem. A lot of them, we ran the contest, people would go on Wendy's website and see her different paintings. I think a lot of them are actually written for the competition. And so they would share titles and things like that. And then when Wendy and Marie Claire were putting them together in the exhibition space, so you would actually have a poem next to a painting, and then there was actually quite a lot of people said that it's a different experience to go around the gallery and look at the combination, rather than just, as you say, just looking at paintings and looking at seeing the poems were framed just next to the painting. And that is another part of the whole Hamish thing, is that sort of combination and collaboration and juxtaposition, So
because it's very true, because we had that kind of feedback from both the poets who wrote the poems, but also Wendy herself. Reading the poem alongside her painting made her look at the painting a bit differently, and vice versa for the poets. They were like, oh, this adds something to my poem. So that was the experience of people attending the gallery as well, but also for the artists themselves.
I think it's quite a unique experience, and I think if there are any other artists that are looking for that sort of combination, and we'd be available and interested, so yeah, let us know.
I think the format is absolutely delightful. I love, in addition to all the talent and the great music and the great poems, I really like the little in-between bits where they're kind of explaining what led them to read their work or sing their song. So I thought that was really nice, and just led to lots of little delightful, magical interactions with people, I thought.
I think when we first started, our aim was to give, we're not quite sure always how to use, what word to use, but grassroots doesn't really sound right, but to give Scotland-based artists, and starting with where we are in Edinburgh, the opportunity to perform on as regular a basis as we could enable, and trying to bring the wonderful talent that there is of people who write their own songs, write their own poems, and are fantastic performers based in Scotland, and trying to make that as more mainstream. Now that's a huge challenge, because you're up against Taylor Swift and Oasis and
Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix and Hamilton, and
Yeah.
all the big shows with lots of money that are coming, that people find the money to go and see these very well-known performers. And what we would our real aim is, for our shows certainly, is to try and get some of that money, and some of that audience members to come to shows where they're seeing work that has been created in Scotland by people that live next door to them, that are hugely talented, but maybe just haven't become household names yet. Because what we're basically very aware of is that we're blown away by the performances, and we love our format, but each individual performance always has something so lovely, whether it's someone who's been performing for years, or whether it's someone this is their first show or their first performance they've ever given. There's something beautiful in that, because they'll have been writing away in their bedroom for years. And, so there's different levels of experience and craft, but that creativity, that creative spirit is very present. And I think that the more people that are able to see and experience that, then our hope is that will then encourage them to see and experience more of it, and not just at the fringe, all year.
I think for us, as part of the format is, and put it into context, is the main part of our Hamish offering is like a mix of people all on stage at once, and taking turns. And that, I think, is a good way for people to get like a taster of each act. But then also it's like the kind of collective context. Generally, like for a lot of it is you're getting to see a little bit of each person at a time, and getting that kind of combination aspect.
That adds into the kind of low risk from an audience point of view, because if you've got like £10 in your pocket, you could go and see a band and a couple of support acts with that, or you could go to a poetry show that might also have some music at it, but you're going to have to spend that money thinking about, do I like that band, do I like the support acts, whatever. But because there's such a variety and such like a broad spectrum of acts at our show, then you're not going to have 20 minutes of something that maybe is great, but it's not your cup of tea, But you have one song or one poem from that act, and then something else which might more be to your taste. Or so you've and also on the flip side of that, you see a performance, you're like, oh, they're amazing. You get one poem or one song from you, they're coming back again. So you've got that kind of, and then people have found that there's been acts that be like, oh, I want to buy their album, or I'm now going to go and see a full show that they put on, a full gig or performance that they do. So we're hoping that it also helps drive people to go to see other shows that are, our peers put on, where you might see a more sustained set of a band or a poetry performer. But you got to see that taster at a Hame-ish. So, not to take away from our Hame-ish shows, they are complete, comprehensive shows in their own right. But I think it has that knock-on effect. Yeah.
I think off stage as well with the performers. So, I mean, with the Hame-ish Originals, the lineup we put together, I mean, not all of them know each other, not all of them will have met. And the fact that they're performing together is something that, kind of makes them know each other better than they would if it was just a regular gig and they're on the lineup together, they do the set and they go off stage. And also with the open mic, so the Hamish Live section, which is open mic in advance, like a lot of poetry open mics, we're not even curating that. That's just people with the first come first serve sort of thing. So, and then there's all sorts of social things that happen from that, and there've been some collaborations, some things that have happened from Hamish events. I mean, the poetry scene and stuff is quite close knit, so a lot of people do know each other, but you know, there's all sorts of, I think with that music element as well, there's a lot of mix on that side, and that's I think that's another unique thing that Hamish has, that it's that as part of the format, is you're getting all these sort of combinations on stage and off stage that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah. And we have, for our Hame-ish Originals, we did have some, you know, at the rehearsals, or the kind of devising sessions that we have, then there would be collaborations for the show emerge, where we would have, you know, a poet doing a poem, and then one of the musicians say, "Oh, do you want me to do some music alongside that?" Or if there's someone singing, you know, "Do you want to do some backing vocals with me?" and things. So that kind of, you know, is a lovely thing. So, so very organic, yes. So maybe even musicians that might already have known each other, but they would never say, you know, "Do you want to come to my gig and do backing vocals?" But for that one song, that's an opportunity. But that kind of like togetherness, like being in it together across a show, is something that when we were started doing our Hame-ish Originals, we really loved, because, you know, as you just said, as Ed just said, like the kind of people who might not have known each other, suddenly they're doing a show together. They're not just doing their set and then kind of going away. But we've seen that also with our Hamish live sets since we started doing our Hamish cabarets, because these you know, the performers are just like straight on stage together, but you still get that kind of like in it together type of vibe, and that's particularly close to my heart, because, you know, I've always been a little bit jealous of people who are in bands. So I'm not a musician, Ed is a musician, and that kind of camaraderie that you get between bandmates, I've always thought that's so amazing, because you wouldn't have the full thing happening if each person wasn't playing their part and supporting each other. And as someone who has performed poetry, it is a very solo endeavour, but what being part of a Hamish does is it gives you that sort of like feeling of, as I've said already, being in it together and that kind of backup. So I like to think that it's as close as I'm ever going to get to being in a band, unless I suddenly decide that I'm going to learn to play a musical instrument. You never know.
Essentially, if you're playing a punk show, whether it's full band or acoustic or whatever else, I'm not convinced necessarily everyone is, you know, sort of hanging on every word of the lyrics, what have you. But there's something weirdly validating about playing something alongside poets. It makes you feel like, oh well, my words must be really important then. But actually, you know, if the songs hold up, that's really pleasing. So that's really nice. And I guess from an audience perspective, if you get that kind of mix, there's not too much of any one thing. The pace is good, so it's variety, it's different perspectives, different angles, and different things, you know, from poems to songs to spoken words, whatever else. It's a nice variety and a really kind of like concise block, which probably doesn't happen in many other shows, I wouldn't think. Certainly not ones we've put on. Yeah, this is our second time doing a Hamish. We did the fourth one, I think, which was in Waterstones, and this is our first one in this. I have to say, a bit of a step up from Waterstones. Anyway, so yeah, it was lovely. Ed and Marie Claire have built something really cool here, I think.
Didn't really want to set up a for-profit business, because we're not in it to personally make money. We're in it to try and bring more money into the sector and then give it back out to people. It didn't feel like this was like an endeavour where we were setting up a business to make profit for ourselves and other shareholders. We're very mindful of the need to generate a profit. But what happens to that profit what's important to us, that what happens to that profit is that it goes back into the business, rather than being money in our pocket or as I say, those of shareholders. So we did we weren't sure what that really meant. We'd heard of a social enterprise, so we did have to do a little bit of research to see what's the right terminology, and what is the different formats, and what forms do we have to fill in. And certainly it's a more straightforward thing to set up. Well, setting up a for-profit business seems like the easiest thing. So setting up a social enterprise, you have to do a little bit more. Quite rightly, you have to have clear aims and objectives and clarity around who you're trying to benefit and why. Setting up a charity seemed a far more complicated thing. So yeah, I guess because we wanted to run a successful money generating business, but generating that money was for the good of our community rather than for ourselves or any other shareholders. And also, there's not a huge amount of money to be made in this game anyway. So let's be honest.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Was that, the margins are very narrow, and I think for us it was like when we started doing it was because we wanted it to exist. We wanted to try it out and see if it worked, and it did work. And then we did 5 shows before COVID and so on. And then we came back. That's when we were sort of serious about, okay, well, what is this? Is this a hobby, or is there something we can do with this? So yeah, I think a social enterprise is a sort of best way forward for us. Where, as you say, it's like, okay, if we get profit and then we can reinvest that and try and build. I think that's part of our aims, is to try and build it, try and also attract some funding, especially for the Hame-ish originals. They're a bigger undertaking in that regard. And sort of to develop. So no, I think, and then I mean, again, going back to the connectivity thing, I think with a lot of because we're set up as a social enterprise, and there's lots of other social enterprises, and that social aspect of it has been good and productive. And I think they're seeing the benefits of that already. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think community side of it as well. We are very keen to develop more and more partnerships with other social enterprise and other creatives, and being part of that sector opens you up to that whole world of people that share those same kind of values that we have, that are also running businesses or involved in the creative sector, but are doing it because they want it. They need to pay their bills and pay their mortgages and feed their cats and stuff like that, of course, but as a business they're not in it to make oodles of money.
I like the relaxed atmosphere. I like the variety of performers. I like the mixture of music and poetry. And I like Marie Claire and Ed as well, as people, how they set this up and how they introduce it. Because it is Hame-ish, it's laid back, and it is like a night out. It feels like a night in. It doesn't feel like you have to make a huge effort. It's not intimidating, I guess, like in the way that sometimes it is to go out. I find it to be so anyway. So it's nice that it's somewhere that you can relax and like absorb what the artworks are, because they're kind of strung together without too much chat from a compere in between. It lets you kind of just dream in a way, like kind of go off into a little dream, which is what I do when I read poetry or listen to musicians. But you would normally do that at home alone, so it's nice to do it in a communal space as well with other people.
There are a few different groups. One group is the artists themselves, giving them an opportunity to perform, but an opportunity to perform in a kind of like more innovative way, where rather than being on the lineup with like 2 other acts, they're in the lineup with like 4 other acts or 5 or 6 other acts. So they're benefiting from having that audiences coming from the kind of natural audience that they might have based on the kind of genre of music that they do or the type of poetry they do or whatever. But they're getting people from those that might be coming because they're coming to see one particular band. They're also going to see them and say, oh, and that might be a genre of music or a type of poetry that they would never, that audience member might not think to go and see, but they're getting the benefit of potentially developing new audiences. I think just being part of a Hame-ish show is also really rewarding and enjoyable for artists as well. And so that's our aim. I think that we would like to put on more shows and work with more partners to enable us to do that, so we can do more of that.
Yeah.
And I think that works for both established artists, so artists that gig regularly, whether that's in the poetry world or the music world, but also for more development as well. So it's doing a set as a kind of fledgling poet, you can go to open mics where you'll be alongside maybe 20, 30 acts. You go up and you do your bit, and then
You do
someone
one
else,
poem,
you do
yeah.
one poem, or maybe
Yeah.
maybe a couple of poems.
Maybe.
So that's great. That's a great opportunity. This is a kind of different type of sort of open mic opportunity,
Yeah.
where you're going to be playing alongside musicians for a start, which and not just someone who might be doing a song as a set. You're kind of collaborating with them. So I'm not trying to devalue all the other formats that there are, but it's different. And also there's going to be fewer of you. So we'll tend to have our Hame-ish Live sets as part of our cabaret. You're going to have 3-4 poets max with the equivalent number of music acts. So, that you've got...
It's generally about 4 or 5 in total for the
Yeah.
Hame-ish Live.
Yeah.
So use a mix of both.
Yeah, so you've got that opportunity to kind of like work with different people, but also if you then progressed on from doing open mics and were asked to do a feature set, that's a lot of pressure, because you've then got to fill 10, 15, 20 minutes of poems, which again is a great experience, but this is a different experience where you get to do the equivalent type, but it's in a more kind of supportive, potentially a more supportive format, and you get a little bit of thinking time between, and you can maybe not have to plan all of the things that you're going to do up front. And I think spontaneity, is a wonderful thing in any performance. So even if you've planned what song or poem you're going to do when you're doing a set that you've planned in advance, if it's just like kind of like off rote, it can be quite stale. But what our format forces people to do is think, I'm going to do that one. And they haven't thought before that they're going to do that, so it does add a bit of spontaneity. And I think so that's the artists.
Yeah.
But I think also the audience members are really important to us, because I really think that, in the entertainment world, if you like, the live entertainment world, there is amazing stuff out there which has got lots of money behind it and big companies behind it. But there's also amazing stuff that doesn't have that. And I think that rich spectrum of creative output there and the entertainment value that can bring to people, there is more to see than just going to see Taylor Swift or Oasis, or watching Netflix, or going to see the big touring shows. And I think having access to all of that in a way that doesn't feel... in a way that is fun and relaxed and low pressure, I think we would hope that is a kind of way in for people. So people who might not say, I don't want to go and see a poetry show, I don't want to go and see a band in this particular style, but you can come and see our show and you can have that broad spectrum and maybe be exposed to new stuff and an awareness of how much talent and creativity there is out there, which doesn't necessarily have to cost you the earth to go and see, but can really touch you and kind of enrich your life as well.
I think it's a slight tangent, but I think the atmosphere of the Hame-ish is very important, and the sort of pressure of, you're going up and you're going to, you have to come up with something that you're going to play. The sort of home-like atmosphere that's created, I think, kind of relaxes people. I think it could be very scary otherwise. But I mean, there's a solidarity part of it that people are on stage with you. But I think generally the atmosphere we try and set at the show, at the shows, is important to that. And I think also, like, when people do perform and they pick something they might not have normally done, it can get quite vulnerable. It can get quite intense. And I think that's a big part of the show and what we do and the sort of audience experience.
What Ed just mentioned about Hame-ish, so the Hame-ish is spelled Hame-ish. So I think in many ways, because we like an ish, most things are not black and white, they're a little bit ish.
That's very true.
And so that, and Hame-ish describes the atmosphere that we try to set at our events, but also it's the punchline to my favourite joke when I was young. I now say when I was like 12, maybe it still makes me laugh, you never know. You're not going to hear the joke until you come along to Hame-ish, so that would be maybe an incentive for people, I don't know. But it is, at least when you hear the joke, you'll know the punchline.
No, I played at the very first Hame-ish, and this idea of mixing songwriters and poets, and I thought, that's a very worthy idea, but nobody will come. And it was a great success. And I thought, well, it's good for a one-off. I hope it lasts. And I was amazed that it did, and I think there are different audiences, because none of the people I saw coming to these were people that would come to normal gigs and so on, and it's great. And the courage of poets to stand up and talk without a guitar, I totally admire. So I've really enjoyed the night, and I hope there's many, many more of them.
So many like amazing people who are just doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's what being part of a social enterprise has been really kind of like eye-opening for us. Because, you know, nobody is doing stuff to make money. It's such hard work. Yeah, it's hard work running a social enterprise. So you're not doing it for self-promotion either. So even if you have, as most people do, have some kind of creative practice of their own, that's definitely part of it, and it's probably been a lot of the inspiration for why you've set up the type of social enterprise that you've set up. But you know, you wouldn't put all that work into it if there wasn't something more from your gut driving it, like a passion. For us, it being a passion for, yes, music, yes, poetry. We also have comedy acts at our shows sometimes, and for me, clowning and other artistic practices as well. Yes, those are the motivations for us, but I think it's a lot to do with the kind of like cross-pollination between those different groups.
Yeah.
So I think since I've been involved in arts in Scotland, I think there's so much going on, and it's all amazing, and it can sometimes be quite siloed though, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think for Hame-ish, what we really are inspired to do is help make some of those connections across those groups, because like one of the things that I've found, like kind of like light bulb moments that have come on for me over the last few years, and particularly since I've started doing clowning, is that doing clowning and some of the things that it made me think about, and some of the language that was used, it's exactly the same as poetry. Yeah, it's not so different. It's just the creative outlet is maybe a bit different. Not always actually, and I think that the more opportunities for creativity creative people have, then the more enriched their lives can be. Because if you're stuck looking at a white page to write a poem, but if you then do a bit of play, yeah, that just opens up all that and gives you imaginative ideas that might mean you don't write a poem about the thing that you've created a little impro about, but it kind of relieves some of that stress and stops people maybe from being so stuck in their own heads a little bit. And likewise, you know, people might come up with something when they're in play as part of clowning, and then I want to write that down, or I want to do that again. Whereas, so it doesn't necessarily have to be something that just is there in the moment and then kind of goes. If you've got those different kind of opportunities for developing different crafts available to you.
That's something you've specifically done. You've done a few clowning for poets courses.
Yeah.
That's something that you've been able to help poets with. The other thing I was going to say was the sort of there are a lot of parallels, and I'm not surprised you found parallels between poetry and clowning. I found a lot of parallels between poetry and singer-songwriters. You know, there's a lot of the people, as you say, in sort of similar fields that are, you know, that are part of that crossover.
Yeah, and it's really exciting because, you know, as I say, creativity is creativity, and I think there are very many people that know that, but sometimes you need a little bit of permission to kind of try something new. But I think being in the company of more creatives, and I know that happens. We're not the only people that enable that to happen, for goodness sake. We're not saying that for 1 minute, but I think that's one of the things we'd like to be part of, and we've found like really kind of cool since we started doing Hame-ish.
I think our format and how we work is placed quite well to help those things.
Yeah. And help people make friends with people that they wouldn't normally meet. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is.
I worked in corporate world for many years and kind of like left that world a few years ago. Not quite burnout, I wouldn't say, but this was a time in my life when I wanted to focus more on the kind of creative practices that I'd been dabbling with, but not really having had the energy to kind of launch into. And I think that has the knock-on effect that running a business is hard, and there's a lot of things that you have to do, and that's fine. I have the skills to do that, but sometimes the motivation can be low because it's like, oh, that's what I used to do. Now I want to spend my life doing creative things, you know? So I think that we need to become more structured at applying for funding. So I think that that's something that I do, but perhaps don't do with enough enthusiasm. So if there's anyone out there who can help with that, that would be amazing. Because when we have applied for things, we haven't been successful so far. But I think that's the same for everybody. Yeah, you need to try again. And sometimes I get distracted by painting a picture or clowning thing, you know. So I think that's testament to the fact that at the moment we're quite small. So I think that if there's anyone who would be interested in helping us with that, that would be amazing. But I think most important thing for us is opportunities for collaboration. So if there's people out there who like what they've heard us talk about, think that we are the kind of people that they would like to work with, we in particular would love to deliver shows and provide shows as part of sort of wider events. So if there's an event going on, whether it's a workshop or a gathering of people, and it would be nice to have something, some entertainment at the end of it, but something which is a bit different, and all the things we've been talking about, then that's something that we would love to talk about providing. So I haven't spoken very much about clowning, but there's different aspects of clowning. One of them is there's a lot of misconceptions about clowning for a start, but I think many people will think that clowning is about being on stage and performing, and it is. Yeah, there's a big aspect of that. But one of the aspects of clowning that I'm really interested in is just the joy that it brings to people's lives. So, you know, the first time I went to a clowning workshop, the first time I went to like a week-long clowning workshop course, one of the things that was like amazing to me was that there were people on that course that I wouldn't normally, I'm not saying everybody was lovely, yeah, but they wouldn't have been my best friends, yeah. But by the end of the week, you see that little essence of a person, which is just beautiful and just amazing, and you just think all these people present versions of themselves out in the world in their lives, whether they're, you know, it's to do with their job role or their family role or maybe experiences they've had, whatever. We all wear different hats, but when you break it right down, that kernel of a person, everybody is so beautiful and amazing, but we are all so pressured to wear all of those hats all of the time, and I think that weighs us down. So quite apart from the performance aspect of clowning, I think what it enables people to do is get back to and have permission to just play, just be themselves, to realise that just being yourself is enough. And I would like to provide opportunities for people to do that more. So whether that's like, you know, maybe people do yoga or read a book to relax or get into that kind of like escape place, that's grand, yeah. Clowning is potentially another way to do that for people. And the workshops that I've been running, and I've got more coming up, that is the kind of focus of clowning that we have. So it might well be that people come along and then they decide that they want to pursue clowning and they want to do more, and that's great, we can do more together, or I can pinpoint them to other places to go as well if they would like, because they're interested in the performance aspect of it. Happy days. But there might also be people who just come along who just want to, on a fairly regular basis, just have that kind of escapism time. And I think that opportunity to just add joy to your life, and you know yourself, anybody, when you do something that really makes you laugh, and clowning's not just about laughing, but really gets you in your gut, yeah, or whether that's by laughing or by it reminding you of something, becoming a bit emotional, whatever, it can just give you that kind of like boost to your day, your week, that just reminds you what life is all about, and what it's not all about, yeah. And I think clowning is a great way to kind of get into that.
A lot of our events have happened in Edinburgh, and I think Edinburgh's a really good city to be based in. I think there's a lot of cross-pollination. I think the size of Edinburgh and and also the sort of transients, people that come here for university or come here for a few years and move on. There's a lot of all sorts of diversity that comes in and out of Edinburgh. But I would also like to explore other places in Scotland. We did a Hame-ish original in Glasgow, the Glad Cafe, which is a great show. I'd like to do more in Glasgow. And then we collaborated with Stanza, big Scottish Poetry Festival, and did a show in Lochgelly. And that was cool. So I mean, on sort of two fronts, like the cities, so Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen, would be great. But also, as we found with Lochgelly, and there's the sort of smaller places and smaller towns that have like really beautiful venues, and they have communities that will come out, and we definitely like to explore that more. So I think that would be, in terms of collaborations and connections and stuff like that, I think we would like to explore that more. And I think the nature, the other thing with Hame-ish as well, is the way, from a tech perspective, a staging perspective, we keep it as stripped back as possible. It's partly to do with the feel and partly that, but it's also a logistics and budget thing. But luckily the two kind of pair well together. It's like if you've got, poetry is basically one of the most stripped back art forms you can have on stage. It's a poet and a microphone, and so that's part of what creates that format. And then singer-songwriters, things that fit in around that. But as a benefit, it means that you can it's very portable. You can take it to places. You don't necessarily need a PA and so forth. You can do it with a few amps. You can have quite a variety of spaces. So I think that's as far as aims and goals and so forth, that's definitely something we're keen to explore and keen to see more Scotland and spread the word about what it is we do and give audiences that experience.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We'd love to, I'm from Ayrshire originally, so I grew up in a little town called Darvel, which is near Kilmarnock, and I was recently at a show at the centre stage space that they have in Kilmarnock, and it's amazing, like a really big space and very well used as well. And when we were at Lochgelly, an amazing space that they have there, and we know that those type of places exist around the country, and we would love to do more shows there. I think also that the thing to add to that is we would also like to work with performers and acts in those places. So what we really don't want to do is bring a contingent of people, of performers from it. Well, we can do some of that, yeah. Bring some, invite some acts that we've already worked with that are based in Edinburgh or based in Glasgow or the Central Belt, to be part of those shows, but we would really like to make sure that those shows are representative of the talent and creativity that is in those local areas. So how do we achieve that? I think what would be great is if there's anyone out there who is in a town or village or, even Glasgow or Edinburgh or Dundee or Inverness or whatever, but anywhere that they are interested in working with us and they have access to that pool of creatives in their area. So we're not just looking for necessarily just a venue that we just come and bring our show and then kind of move on.
Yeah.
We would like to create that show so that it kind of reflects and involves and is part of that community. And we can bring our format, we can bring our experience of having delivered shows, but we would want that to be in partnership with anyone who's kind of in that situation.
When we started, we were doing the Hame-ish originals, and we've pivoted to doing Hame-ish cabarets. We love both formats. I would like to do more Hame-ish originals and keep that format alive as well. So yeah, as Marie-Claire was saying, it's primarily it's a funding thing, but is a sort of cross collaboration with social enterprises that we can exchange things and we can provide. So yeah, we'd be very interested in doing the Hame-ish originals, and part of how we do what we do with the shows. It's that devising together and working together, and And to me, like with the Hame-ish originals, it's like, and you have like basically a first half, an interval, and a second half. So it's quite a sort of theatre style presentation of a show. And I think that is, to me, I think the closest thing format wise I've seen to it is a sort of songwriter circle. You have maybe 3 acts on stage and they play a song and so forth. But I'm not sure, like, I got in trouble for this once in one of the courses where I said I think it's pretty unique. I can't think, and they were like, oh, it must be. And I'm like, well, I've looked around as far as I can tell. So tangent, but it'd be nice to do more of those and have more of that, and have that as part of the, for audiences to be able to see. And I think each show we create is unique that way. So yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point, Ed, because I think we do have those two, the Hame-ish original and the Hame-ish cabaret, but there's also, that gives us two sort of like types of show that we can provide that are basically at different price points. Yeah?
Yes.
So, it's, but then there are kind of like, there are variations in between that we can create. So I think what that kind of means in terms of who we would like to work with is that we would love to be able to do more of our Hame-ish original shows, both create more shows and deliver more shows. We have got some shows that are kind of like in the can that we could just spin up. There would be a bit of work to do, but we could just spin up and deliver. And they, we can do that with funding, but also if there's anyone out there who is working in more of a corporate world or is putting on an event that's already funded, then we would love to talk to them as well, because there's a wealth of options between our Hame-ish cabarets, which are the kind of lower cost, still amazing shows, but for us to put on, they don't cost as much, whereas the Hame-ish originals do, and there's a variety of different things we can do in between there. So if there is anyone out there who is looking to put on an event and would like something a little bit different at it, then we could do a Hame-ish cabaret, or we could do something which is a more of a curated format. And we have in our community, a variety of different types of performers and types of acts, whether that's music, poetry, or comedy, and levels of experience in performing. So I think that we are also open to working with people who have money.
I come regularly most months. It's a really unique sort of arts show. I think so much of it's to do with like the collaborative element of it. They put in a lot of work with all the artists, organising the show, organising the themes of it, bouncing off each other, and it leads to a whole cohesive thing as opposed to it feeling like a bunch of sets stuck together. And I've not really found anywhere else like it.
Just been really helpful and open and genuinely interested in listening to where we are now with no kind of like judgment. We know that there are various sizes and shapes and levels of experience and appetite and time available across all sorts of different social enterprises. And I think one of the things that I've found really cool about working with you guys is that, you meet us where we are, and there's no kind of judgment on that. Of course you would hope there wouldn't be, but it's genuinely felt that that's the case. And just any sort of advice or guidance or connections that have been made, they have come from a place of really trying to understand our organisation, what we might need, and also the connections to other organisations who genuinely we might have some kind of synergy with and some kind of connection. So I know that there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of social enterprises. So just that awareness of the landscape and being able to pinpoint the ones that would be good organisations for us to connect with, that helps us to not have to do all of that research, but also sort of learning. You guys come with that knowledge and experience from the time that you've worked in the sector. So for people coming in who are fairly new, then, you know, we don't know all of the organisations, but just even through this conversation, you'll be able to say, oh, do you know these people? Because you're thinking about the ones that are going to be relevant for us to connect with, and then following through by actually helping make those introductions has been sort of really valuable for me. So we are going to apply for funding, and hopefully we will be successful. So
That's
therefore
good.
we will have more money to do more stuff, including more Hame-ish original shows. And we've also do have some sort of like fledgling partnerships that we've started to build up, which hopefully will give us the opportunity to do stuff which is kind of like springboarding off the type of formats that we already have, whether that's from Hame-ish or whether it's in the clowning space or other collaborations like we did with Wendy Sarah. So I think, you know, we definitely want to keep on doing what we're doing. So we run our cabarets largely on a monthly basis. So we would want to continue to do that, but we also want to continue to be able to be creative with what we're doing, and I think partnerships will enable us to do that, because we'll kind of, you know, we have our aims and objectives, and then our partners will have theirs, and there'll be a kind of meeting in the middle, which might mean that we do something which is a bit of another evolution of what we already do. So I think for me that's really exciting, because I'm always excited about not just doing the same thing but continuing to evolve it and make it sort of bigger and better. I think I'm really also excited the fact that since we started doing the cabarets, we've had it's given us the opportunity to work with more artists and more acts. So I think that is helping to spread the word about what Hame-ish is about. So I'm excited to continue to do that. So we're getting people come that want to be part of a Hame-ish Live because, or after they've had a conversation with someone else who has done it and said, oh, I really had a great night, you should do this. Yeah. So I think that's not only great to hear, as a kind of testimonial, but it also is a really kind of effective way of kind of like growing the people that would be involved in our show. So we'd like more of that. I think also, finally, before I let you speak, we are starting to get involved in doing more things like this. So talking about what we're doing and why we're doing it, whether that's through working with you guys at ESEN or off our own bat, doing more stuff on social media. And while it's not our natural place necessarily, although we're quite happy to talk about what we do, we are not 16-year-olds. I think we genuinely enjoy it, and I think you can see that there's more sort of like chatter about what we do at Hame-ish, and having more of a kind of it helps us to kind of move closer towards the goals that we've spoken about already, and it's another creative thing to do, which is quite exciting.
I think the only thing I was going to add, about Hame-ish Live and the open mic part of it, and I think we've had a diverse group of people that have signed up for it and had all sorts of. I think that's been really good, and like see that continue, and see, as Maricla says, just keep spreading it and keep, the more diversity and stuff we can show on stage, I think the more it sort of it's a self-perpetuating sort of thing that and with the format we've got,
Yeah, no, that's really, really true. The amount of, our lineups are never the same, and they have, diversity in all different, aspects. And it's really exciting to see people that maybe wouldn't normally work together be doing so, and Yeah, more of that as well, I agree.
I absolutely loved it. It was good. So the first time I performed, it was Hame-ish 4, and it was in Waterstones, so I was back there. So this is it's really cool in this venue, and it's really, really nice. And yeah, the sound was nice, and the audience were just lovely and really warm, and it's a great concept. It's a good concept. It's almost like watching a TV show. I mean, most people will come with a set list that you've got, but because it's all sort of scripted beforehand almost, or at least conceived beforehand, people will feel that they're really part of just a homely vibe, and it's like a bit of a family sort of vibe, because it's like one's connecting after the other and working together, and it's nice.
So I grew up in Ayrshire, and I moved to Edinburgh for work, love, about 6 years ago. Is it more than that? 6 or 7 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's taken me a little bit of time to love Edinburgh, I must admit. Yeah. Is that controversial? Oh, I don't know. So the city that I was familiar with when I was growing up was obviously Glasgow, coming more from the west coast. So Edinburgh was always far, far, far away. Actually, now I realise it's really not that far away, because I can get home fairly quickly. But I think what I love about Edinburgh is the diversity. Yeah. So there's just so many people come to Edinburgh, I guess, maybe because it's the capital of Scotland. So if you're coming to Scotland, that's where you would start, I suppose. But what that means is that you get a really good mix of Indigenous Scottish people, if you like, but also Scottish people from all over Scotland would end up in Edinburgh, but also people from the rest of the UK. So we have a lot of friends who are from different parts of England and from all over the world, and I think that cross section, or that kind of diversity of people, makes for a richness of creativity, but I think it also makes for a richness of tolerance as well, and I think that's been reflected in our shows as well. But it's definitely something which has been really exciting for me. There are aspects of Scotland generally that I love, and there are aspects of Scotland that I love less. And I think that having the diversity of people in Edinburgh, I think helps maintain the Scottishness, but also helps give it more of a kind of like international and flavour. I think Edinburgh is just also a beautiful city, and sometimes I think when you are born and bred somewhere, you don't realise that. But also the people who are from outside of Edinburgh, quite often, and seeing the tourists around reminds me to look up sometimes. Now that I've been here for a few years, you get the bus, you go along Princess Street, and then there's people taking photos, and you're like, what are they taking photos of? Oh yeah, because that's like pretty amazing, having like a big hill and a castle right in the middle of your city centre. So I think it's a beautiful city, and it's beautiful in a different way from Glasgow. Yeah. So yeah, those are some of the things I love about Edinburgh. I do love Edinburgh now that I'm here for a while, lived here.
So I'm from the mean streets of Ravelston. So yeah, I grew up here. I did move away, so I was away for a few years, and I came back, and so, but that was interesting for reasons Marie Claire said, like you to come back to the city. And yeah, it is beautiful. It is. The buses are good. It's quite walkable, especially the city centre. So there's things I like about it. I think from a sort of artistic, creative point of view, Edinburgh's really interesting. It's a big city, not as big as Glasgow, but there's a good size to it. And yet I find there's quite a lot of small pockets everywhere. So I think what's quite unique is that, in say a bigger city like Glasgow, you might have a particular type of music or a particular type of, art that is, and there's a whole bunch of people that do it, and what they do is kind of focused around that one particular type. But I think Edinburgh, what's interesting in Edinburgh is that I think it kind of struggles to build up scenes of that size. So what ends up happening is you have, with obviously with the social enterprise thing, but not just that, there's a lot of cross-pollination, collaboration by necessity, and it's also, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge, I think, with venues and things like that, but just trying to find the right spaces and the right, you know, the sort of logistical issues. But there's a real, I think, a real willingness to collaborate, and which I find really, and I think there's something quite unique about Edinburgh is the sort of art that you get from that and from the situation that we're in. And yeah, I think like there's just so much potential, I think, in Edinburgh, and there's so much. So yeah, that's something we're hoping to sort of try and develop and build.
I thought it was fantastic. I really liked the concept on how all the artists get up and they take a turn like a traditional ceilidh. It was really nice atmosphere, very chilled out and relaxed, and I'd really recommend everybody popping along to their next Hame-ish.
Hame-ish, in terms of our shows, are a night out that feels like a night in.